What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 106 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide, wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. We've got a jam-packed episode this week, much like this year is jam-packed with just exceptional RPGs. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would. Do you think the other preserves get really upset that we always use jam and to say jam pack? Like marmalade's just like seething that it really never gets its day.
This episode is marmalade packed. We can make that a thing if you want.
Marmalade got its own name anyway. It's just orange jam. It's fooling nobody, but it gets its own name anyway. So I feel like, it's
Maybe
already
that's
had
the
its time to
trade-off.
shine. Yeah.
Right? It's like you don't get to be used as a colloquial term when you decided you wanted a fancy name, you know? It could have just been orange jam, and then it would be in on the bit.
Yeah, it would have been there, So maybe,
You're making a lot of sense.
Yes, stop being on your pedestal. Getting everyone to call you marmalade instead of just jam.
Speaking of pedestals, though, quite a few RPGs to put on a pedestal this year, right? I mean, we've talked a few times already about kind of circling the conversation that I'm sure we'll have next year, right? Of like, is 2023 one of the all-time great years?
Yeah. Do you think the conversation is going to be, is 2024 truly abysmal? There's nothing to play because everything came out last year.
Honestly, I hope so. Because I would love the chance to catch up. I got games from 2022 I want to get back to, let alone some of the games from 2023 I haven't gotten to play.
Maybe Sony could release like a silent, like a secret, unknown Horizon game. And if nothing else comes out, it might finally win Game of the Year. But I think GTA 6 is out next year, so actually scratch that. Yeah, it's probably not going to happen.
If next year was the year of like it's GTA 6 and like nothing else happens, like that'd be great.
And the Switch too, right? Like seemingly that's coming next year.
But it's a launch year, so there's like what, 2 games on it maybe? Come on, like maybe.
Yeah, but it could be 2 like slam dunk smash hit games. You never know.
You're not wrong. Look, listen. Since 2017, right? Which up until this year I've long maintained I think best year in gaming. Or at least, really strong contender for number 1, right? It's been pretty much nonstop bangers. Almost every year has been great, and I feel like it's been a nonstop freight train, and like
or maybe just in that golden era, we're about to get out of it now. We're into that like lull period. I mean, we are coming into the mid-gen, which is usually when it like quietens down a little bit.
But
like we're 3 years into that generation cycle. I kind of feel like we usually have like that 1 year, like 2016 was a bit crap, and then we come out to 2017, and it's like, wow, here we go.
Yeah, it could be. But I mean, even if that is the case, right? There's so much great stuff this year, especially like again, right? So many of these like big meaty JRPGs, or not even just JRPGs, RPGs, that I don't know that anyone's gonna be bothered by a bit of a slow period in the early half of next year, right? At least, while they're chipping away at the Starfields and Baldur's Gate 3s, and all these other games that you probably still haven't gotten to yet. But my question for you is, are we going to see a Game of the Year list predominantly made up of RPGs for the first time maybe ever? Because, like, so here's the thing.
I think so, yeah. I mean, apart from maybe Tears of the Kingdom, if you don't consider that an RPG, yeah.
I'd say that's more of an action-adventure game than
Some
it is an RPG.
people do consider that style of Zelda game, the Breath of the Wild style, as more of an RPG than a traditional adventure game.
To me, I could entertain that, but I think to me, like, there's not enough like character building in that game for it to be an RPG. Like, more of it is about like
about
the
your character, about Link, because
like Link as a character doesn't grow as much as like your inventory and skill set does by like achieving
whereas
things.
like the protagonist in Persona 5 obviously does, the Joker obviously does, and he has like a really big story arc.
Well, and it's like, obviously you can't. I mean, for that, it's a turn-based RPG for sure, right? Like it's I think of RPGs as being a little more spreadsheety, like having more numbers going on, and more like
Okay, yeah, I could see
character
that.
building.
So
Um,
you'd roll out Jedi,
yeah,
survival as
because
well.
to
That's
me
fun.
that's like a story-driven action adventure game, right? More than it is an RPG. And it's like, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of those games that have RPG elements, right? I think there are a lot of modern action adventure games that pull from the RPG genre. But when I think something's like Baldur's Gate is an RPG, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's a CRPG. First time in many, many years since I guess Divinity Original Sin 2 was the last one I remember playing. At least the last popular one.
yeah, right. At least the last one that was like that made a big splash. And this a lot more than that, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, I
currently
mean this has D&D on it, so yeah, that's a big reason why.
I mean, sure, but I think it's even more than that, right? Like Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2 like are definitely not as big in scope as Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 has like a more, you know, um I don't want to say triple A because like it definitely feels a little like older, right? But like it has more of that presentation and it being like so
I think the only
dialogue
reason it
oriented and so,
feels
you know.
I
But
think the only reason it feels odd, and we'll talk about this after the jump when we talk big into Baldur's Gate.
yeah,
But
yeah, we're gonna
I think
finally
the only
dive into it
reason,
today.
yeah, I know, right? I finally got somewhere in the game. I feel like the only reason it feels odd is just because of the genre of game it is. It feels like a Baldur's Gate game, but it does feel like a modern version of that game.
Yeah, it's not to say that I don't think it feels modern, but it's like in the in our Discord, Sierra, the longtime listener of the show, not our co-host on Nintendo Noise, um, she mentioned that it felt like she was playing a PS2 game, but then she said like affectionately, and like I think it has a little of that where it's like
Mm,
not that it's like old
I don't
fashioned
know that
per
I
se,
agree
but
with that. I feel like PS2 is too far back, but
I agree.
maybe.
I countered and said I thought it felt more like a 360 game. Like
Mm,
we talked about it. I played it last year. This game is such a Dragon Age Origins spiritual successor. Like the dialogue system, like the conversation system, is literally exactly the same. And it has that look and that feel to it. I think. But not to say that it doesn't feel like a modern game or anything like that, because it certainly does. But I feel like it more comes from the depth of the game, right? Is like what makes it feel modern to me is that it's like it's bigger and deeper and like in the way that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have that great kind of element of like, I wonder if I can do this. And the answer is almost always yes. I love that it's the same thing in this game, but rather than being like gameplay systems or physics or whatever, it's more about role playing, right? And like
yeah, there's
talking people
always the
into things.
dialogue choice that I'm thinking is always there. And I love that. Like, I'm
Yeah.
always thinking, like, what the fuck are you talking about? And that's usually like one of the dialogue
Yeah.
choices. And I find it so funny every time because it's like the developers knew that that's what everyone playing would be thinking.
Yeah, and, like, I love how often it has moments where I'm like, "Oh, a fun dungeon master would let me try to do this," and then the game's like, "Oh, you can do that if you want," you know?
Hmm.
Like, there's an instance I ran into recently that we'll talk about where, like.
Yeah, yeah. No spoilers. This that's
Yeah,
up.
yeah, in the back half of the show, we'll let you know before we get into any spoiler stuff, but I think the fun thing about this game is it's kind of impossible to spoil if you just talk about things that you do, because unless you are the same class and have the same stats and go and do the same thing that I did, like, you could go talk to those same characters and have a totally different interaction than I did, even if you have
Yeah,
the
but
same
you could
skill.
talk to those characters with someone else in your party and
That
have the
doesn't
same
mean
interaction.
not necessarily, not if you don't have somebody that has the same skills that I do,
Well, true. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
I know.
well,
There's some characters in that game I'm absolutely in love with. I find them hilarious.
yeah, yeah, the writing's really good, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Um, but yeah, I
But
mean, I wanted to
so
run.
just to put a pin on it, Baldur's Gate,
Yeah,
very, very good. It's a 96.
96.
It's the highest rated RPG of the year.
That's where I was driving, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's the highest rated RPG, but it's also tied for the highest rated game of the year, right? Alongside Tears of the Kingdom. So, I mean,
Mm.
you get into it, right? Like looking at the list of big RPGs that have dropped this year that I went and pulled just for the sake of this conversation. We have Baldur's Gate at 96, and these are all their Metacritic scores. Baldur's Gate at a 96, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed, which is a DLC, but still 92, very high. Diablo 4, 91. Sea of Stars, 91. Starfield, 88. Final Fantasy 16, 87.
Now, I want to touch a little bit on scores in general because I kind of feel more and more increasingly like they're irrelevant and that we should stop looking at them and putting them on a pedestal so much because Diablo 4 got a 91 at launch. It then had an absolutely horrific update, and season 1 was a disaster.
Yeah.
We're on to season 2 now, and they've corrected some of that stuff. But it just goes to show how quickly things can change. We went from everyone loving that game to it being like, what the hell are you doing? And I kind of feel like the inverse seems to be happening somewhat with Starfield in places where there were some outlier reviews that gave it like 7. Across the board, it seemed to be 8s and 9s, but there was a couple of reviews that were a little bit less than that. And the consensus seemed to be that, you know, maybe it was because you should be playing it in this way or another, and whether a game should be forcing you into playing it in a certain way, especially with something like this, is another question. But what do you feel? How do you feel about review scores in general? I know a lot of publications have dropped them. Kotaku, Polygon, they don't give scores anymore. They just give an overview at the end, and you can still read their review on Metacritic, but there's no score there.
So, I don't know. I think that like how valuable review scores are really comes down to the reader, right? More than the review. And I think that's my issue with them. Is it has a lot less to do with scores as a concept than it does the fact that like readers don't really want to read reviews. They want to jump ahead and react to review scores, and they either use them to validate the opinion that they already had, and then and like if you're doing that as a purchaser, I think that's actually fine. That's like the point of them, right? It's like,
Yeah, I did that with Elden Ring.
yeah, right? Like, oh, I'm on the fence about it. And you go and you see, oh, wow, nines, tens, nothing but nines and tens. It's got to be a pretty good game. And you read a couple people's pull quotes and you get a general sense of things and you move on, right?
Hmm.
I think where that gets dicey is where you get into stuff like this, where it's like, this game gets given a 7 and people are immediately ascribing, merit or lack of merit to that, right? Where it's like,
Especially when it was one of the first reviews that dropped, right? It
sure.
was the one everyone was talking about. It's from IGN. It's from a reputable, outlet. But it was only IGN, like main IGN. You looked at IGN Spain, IGN Portugal, IGN Brazil. All of them were giving it, 9 and 10. And obviously, an individual reviewer is going to have their own opinion and their own thoughts on
Yeah,
things.
and that's the thing is like people were looking at that as like, oh, see, like they don't even agree. It's like, right, like there's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
that.
I saw some
Like,
people, and obviously, like Sony ponies were like, oh, they can't believe they spent all this money on Bethesda, and this is all they get is just this average game that doesn't
right.
even live up to expectations.
That's kind of the whole thing for me, right? Is like I think when you get into, review scores or whatever, right? Like if you have an axe to grind, you can argue with anybody about anything, right? If somebody gives a game a score that's too high, then it's like, oh, they're paid off. It's this, it's that, But I also think that there's a reason that we have scores like this, right? Like people like things to be digestible and understandable and not require them to read an entire article to get a taste of what people think. And that's like, I think that's not like limited to video game reviews or like the internet age, right? Like you think about back to like the like uh people you think of stereotypically when you think of movie reviews, right? Like in pop culture is like Siskel and Ebert, right? And it's like the two thumbs up. Like that system caught on for a reason because it's like, oh, like these guys are well-known reviewers and they say that something's either good or not, or oh, it's kind of okay or it's bad, or right. Like that's what you want. You want a taste of opinions. And then generally you want to go formulate your own because at the end of
Which
the
I,
day,
I always liked how Famitsu did it, where they would get like 4 or 5 people to review it and give
yeah,
it like, and I know they gave it a different score across the board, but
it's like
I
that's
liked that you got a different taste from everyone.
I think that's the whole thing though, right? It's like reviews are a product. And like
Yeah,
what kind of discussion you want, it exists for you because what you're talking about, like a review discussion, that's also what I like. I don't want to necessarily just hear one person's opinion. I want to hear a
agreed.
bunch of
Yeah.
different opinions and I want to hear them in conversation with one another, which is why I usually go listen to review podcasts, right? Like I've listened to 3, 4 different discussions with different roundtables of people who played and reviewed the game and listened to them talk about it
Yeah,
together.
same here. And I'm just like I'm all in on it because the people that love Bethesda games are really getting across that this is exactly what they wanted. And and
Yeah, but I mean,
and
I don't know. I've heard some people who also really love Bethesda games that
yeah,
are way closer on that 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10. So it's like that's the whole point, though, right? Is that like everyone has a different opinion, so you need to figure out whose opinions do I gravitate towards, and then you go and listen to their coverage. That's why people listen. They want to. That's why people in our Discord have been like, I want to hear you guys talk about Baldur's Gate, right? Because like I want to hear your opinions on it because
mhm.
they jive with what we like to play, right? So I think, when it comes to the number thing, it's like it exists for a reason. It exists so that you can
It's
have
an easy way to compare games, and I
yeah.
totally get that.
I don't see
My
why you can't just do a pull quote, right? I think if we got rid of numbers, you could do that, but then
I
it's
mean,
like
they do that on Metacritic anyway. You'll get the quote
right,
alongside the score, but you've got to look through them all. And the thing I really don't like about Metacritic is, you can have one review just really pull the score down. Like there's one review that, from Merry Station. I've never heard of the publication. I'm sure they're a reputable outlet, but they gave it a 5.8. And that's just like pulls Starfield's score all the way down because it's just an average of all the reviews across the board.
right.
So this, in the same way that we had that with Tears of the Kingdom, right? It was nines and tens across the board, apart from one review from one person who didn't like the game, who you kind of, I think, made the point that maybe they had a bit of an axe to grind or something, or they wanted to make a piece out of
Yeah, they
it.
have a point to make.
Yeah, they have a point to make, and that pulls the score down. And I think looking at them across the board, I think maybe you should have a look at them, look at the consensus, figure out who you who your tastes align with. And I've always done that with movie reviews as well. It's like my tastes align with like Mark Commode, for example. So I'll read his reviews, and if he likes a movie, I usually like the movie. If he thinks a movie's trash or hard to comprehend or understand or follow, I usually kind of feel the same thing.
Yeah, and I think
And
that's ultimately what you need to do, right? And I think like you need to look at organizations like OpenCritic or Metacritic or whatever for what they are. They're an aggregate.
yeah,
Like it's not and I guess like the ultimate thing is like, does it matter if Tears of the Kingdom is like a half a point lower or something because some person gave it a 5? Like we all know it's great. And like you
yeah,
look at a 96, 97, and you're like, yeah, right, cool. Like that track.
yeah. My point is that these scores fluctuate. You've got Sea of Stars down here as a 91, Metacritic saying it's an 88 now, and that's changed in like what 3 hours since you put this document
I
together.
mean, you might also be looking at a different version. I think you might be looking at PC. I think it got a 91 on consoles.
Quite possibly, yeah.
So it's like it,
There's that to take into consideration as well, I guess. Yeah, Starfield got 87 on PC, but 88 on
yeah,
consoles,
and
which is
I pulled
strange.
the highest score for each
Yeah.
game. So
My
like
my point being though, these scores constantly change. A lot of these games are living, breathing products, especially something like Diablo and Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate was an early access game for a number of years, and then it finally came out. Right, it's already had 2 massive patches. They're talking about adding additional endgame content. They're talking about adding additional storylines, additional dialogue for certain character classes. When it comes to these scores, and Diablo is really the one that I'm focusing in on, it doesn't deserve to be a 91 anymore because of the changes that were made post launch. Like, how do you address that? Because this is something that's cemented in time as this is the score it is. It's a 91. And granted, yeah, we tested this on this date and this is the score we came up with and it was fine then. If fundamental changes happen,
yeah,
you
but
kind of feel like we should be re-reviewing these
I
things
mean,
and giving
outlets
it a
do
different
that though,
score.
right? Like a lot of outlets do reviews in progress. There are a couple outlets that have refused to apply a score to Starfield right now because of they feel that way and they want to play it for longer. It's like I think it's a tough thing because the idea that like I saw somebody leave a comment where it's like, oh, no one has to rush to review Starfield. Like they're doing it for clicks and for money. And it's like, yeah, well, they're businesses, right? Businesses need revenue.
Mhm.
So like it is what it is. And also the idea that like we should all hold hands and not review something until we've put X amount of time into it or something like that. It's like, well, like there are consumers out there that want to read reviews for the product and have that influence their purchasing decision. So it's like you have to think about the fact that like these products all exist for different people, right? Like there are people who look at reviews and the only time that they're ever going to engage with a review is going to OpenCritic or Metacritic and seeing what the score is and being like 88, cool, good, I'll buy it then. Or if they get there and they're like, ooh, 60, oh, 70, never mind, right? And like,
It's so funny to me as well that like sevens have become such a bad number. You know, IGN on their rating system, seven is a good game, and yet
sure.
we look at it as like, oh, I shouldn't bother even touching this. I
Well, but
shouldn't bother picking it up.
I think that speaks to the lack of choice that or I'm sorry, the rather the opposite of that, the breadth of choice that you have as a person, right? Like, you got to think again, there are degrees of people who play video games, right? And obviously, like us, the folks here, us on the mic and the folks listening here, we all probably play a lot more video games than the average person. So it's like there are probably a lot of games that are like quote unquote sevens that you're like, oh, I really like that game, and like, I think I said that about maybe it was Guardians of the Galaxy where I was like, maybe it's like a 7 or an 8, but like I love it like it's a 9. Like I really I had a lot of fun with this game, even if it is like maybe it's not a 9 out of 10, a 10 out of 10. So what? Like that's fine. But I think like you have to accept the reality of what that looks like though, right? If you're the type of person who only plays a handful of video games a year and maybe you do really like movies or maybe you are really into music or you're really into live theater or sports or like literally any other thing that exists in the entirety of the human experience, which at this point in time is just there's an endless amount of crap to watch or to engage with or read or whatever. And like if video games aren't your primary form of entertainment, right? And it is the kind of thing where like, yeah, I go real hard on a few video games a year, right? Or like I play video games for maybe 10 or fewer hours a week and it's a part of my media diet, but I don't play games as much as I watch TV or read books or whatever, then yeah, like, are you gonna wanna it's the same way that I'm sure you and I feel about like TV or movies, right? Like, how many movies are there that are like, it's like a 7 or it's an okay TV show. And it's like, okay, but like, am I gonna take the time to watch it then when I could be playing a 10 out of 10 video game and watching a 10 out of 10 TV
Yeah,
show
I
and
get that.
watching a 10 out of
I
10
literally
movie?
had this conversation with my dad when I went down for my mum's birthday. And he was like, "You're not really a film person, are you?" And I was like, "No, not really. I spend most of my time either working or playing games. Like those are the two things that consume my time." Like, so I do get that, and I also get that budgets are limited. People want to make sure their money's going where they're going to enjoy their time, and
Yeah,
also
exactly.
time's limited. You know.
And that's the thing, right? Is like you have to think about that because I think us, like the enthusiast crowd, like if you're the type of person that's going to go and actually read multiple reviews, like I listened to 5 or 6 hours worth of discussion about this video game yesterday while I was doing chores and stuff, right? Like there are millions of people that are going to play this game. There are dozens of friends of mine that are going to be excited to play this game and will sink hundreds of hours into it that didn't listen to 6 to 10 plus hours of conversation about it before they could even touch it, right? And like they're looking to get a different thing out of a review than I am. I want to listen to the discussion and have this nuance. Like, what did you take away from it? How did you feel about this mechanic? How did it impact you emotionally? A lot of people don't care. They just want to be like, is this worth $70? Yeah. Okay. Should I buy an Xbox for this game? Yeah. Okay. Great. Like, that's what they want out of it. And for them, a number is what they want. And IGN being like, it's a 7 out of 10 is like, that's information that they might want because, however you want to talk about it, like, oh, like I've heard people say the game doesn't get good until 12 hours in. I've heard people say the game doesn't really start until New Game Plus. Like, that Todd Howard himself said that, right? Like, There, Gene Park from the Washington Post. I saw him quote tweet a tweet where someone said, it felt like, reviewers were rushed. They could have used more time. He said, I think I could have used, we all could have used a month to review, at least a month to review Starfield, right? So it's like you get
Yeah,
into
I
this.
saw that. I saw that tweet. It was meant to be I think he said it's meant to be played as a marathon rather than a sprint, right? Something like that.
Exactly, right? And then like here, I have a comment from and
Do
again,
you
I said,
think people play like that though? Because I don't. I don't think people play like that. I think when people get something fresh, something new, they go all in on it. And I do every time I get a new game.
I
I
don't
go
think you
all in
can.
on it.
I think the very notion of, do you think people do this? I don't. I think that's, you have to divorce yourself from that mentality if you actually
Mm-hmm.
want to understand how anything works. And like, that sounds condescending. I hope it doesn't come off that way, but I genuinely mean this. And I've argued with people in the Discord or whatever, like, about this, and in good fun, right? We're all just having conversations about a hobby we love. But like, you have to divorce yourself from, well, I don't behave this way. I would never buy this product, right? Or like, I would never. And it's like, that's not the question, right? And you're like, I always dive into the game and play it this way. Yeah, for sure you do. But a lot of people don't, right? Like, a lot of people, like again, this is super anecdotal, but this is the entire point of this conversation, is that everyone's experience is anecdotal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it only becomes significant data when there are large clusters of players that behave in the same way, right? From my point of view, right, based on my understanding, I imagine that there are a few different ways that people engage with any game like that, right? Which is either you're the type of person who gets the game and you go all in on it and you spend, all the time you're going to spend in it, or 90% of the time you're going to spend in it, or 75, whatever, in the first couple of weeks you have it, you go really hard, you get the experience you're going to get out of it, you put it down, you walk away, right? I think there's similar to that, people who play, they get 20, 40, however many hours in, they're like, I've had my fill, they walk away. Then I think there are tons of people, and again, it's that person who I'm talking about before, who doesn't, maybe plays video games every week, but it's not their primary form of entertainment, right? Or it's one of the dozens of things competing for their attention on any given week or day. Maybe they get the game and the weekend it comes out, right? They take off a day from work, they play it for a couple days, they get into it, and then they chip away at it for weeks, months, years, right? Like, I think a lot of people play that way. I know before I made content about games, there were games I played that way, where like you start it
I
and
don't know
then,
that many people play this type of game that way though. Like I can see it for a story driven, narrative driven game where you've got one direction that they're easier to chip away at, that you can put it down at any time. When you come back, it's obvious to know what you're meant to be doing and where you left it off. But I've done that with this kind of game, like,
no, but you're talking about
I'd
putting it
stop.
down and coming back to it. I'm not. I'm saying that they play it for a couple hours a week, every week, for until they're done with it. And if the game
Mm-hmm.
is hundreds of, like, this is, again, it's an anecdotal thing, but I can think of a few of my friends who are gamers, right? Or people who play games, but they're more casual. I have a friend who, she did this with Fallout 4. She played Fallout 4 for like 2 years, right? And it was because
That
she
must have
didn't,
been a really unsatisfying ending for her after 2 years to find out that game
I mean,
was mediocre.
I guess she liked it enough. She rolled another character and played it again. So, but like, that was what she did. And she only played the game when she worked out, and she worked out for however many hours a week. And it would be like, this is what I do. I sit down, I get on the treadmill, I play Fallout. Like, this is when I
Did
play
she
the game.
use the Pit Boy music as her workout track? Is she like
Great
working
question.
out to like 50s music?
Probably, if I had to guess. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I genuinely think that happens. And I think there are people that'll play the game and they'll beat it and they'll roll credits and then they'll do New Game Plus and they'll play it like 10 or 15 times.
Yeah, that was an
Like,
interesting conversation that we had with Wakahula in the Discord, because I, like him, have never, ever, ever played a New Game Plus, and I've never, ever had the desire to
again,
play a New Game
though,
Plus.
you have to recognize that that's a different
No,
type of player.
no, but I'm not talking about that. But that does give me pause when people say, this game doesn't really get started until New Game Plus. And I go, do I really want to invest 40 hours to complete the main storyline to get to that point where the game really starts, according to Todd Howard? I don't know that that's for me, but I'll find out next week, I guess, when we
Yeah, yeah.
discuss it.
I don't know. Yeah, and we have a question here I want to pull from the question block. This one comes from Left Eye Lazy, who said, "Have you guys done a Starfield review yet? I'm having such a weird experience with this game online. I've seen the dumb drama and I've seen complaints, but I haven't seen a single positive tweet about the game. Not an I'm having fun, nothing. What's going on with this game? No Man's Sky 2? I think that might just be your timeline, you know? I think ultimately Starfield is going to be a polarizing game. The fact that it's a game that's getting 10s and 7s speaks to the fact that it's polarizing and speaks to the fact that it's for certain types of players and not for others. I won't be surprised if you bounce off this game, Steve. I also won't be surprised if you find a goofy angle where you're like, I found the fun doing this dumb thing, and then that's enough to get you through.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't finish it. Maybe you just get a taste, and like that's the experience you
That's
have
how
with
I
it.
could see myself doing it,
I don't know.
especially how much I'm enjoying Baldur's Gate at the moment. I really want to pull something that I'm really, really having a good time
Yeah,
with for something that's mediocre. I think there's potentially two reasons here, though. Starfield's not even out yet as of the time of recording. It's technically officially out on the 6th of September. It's
right.
only people that paid £100 or $100 to get early access or the
And
£35 upgrade on the Game Pass.
yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out that I think a lot of people did that because they wanted to create drama on the internet. You know, they're like you said, there are Sony ponies who are like, "Oh, look, I can't believe you if you walk in 15 minutes in one direction, it makes you go back to your ship. Like, game's busted. Oh, enjoy your 30 frames per second. Oh, you know, it's like that's there's a huge contingency of people that have that attitude about it right now. And I think part of it is probably that even I think the people that like it have reservations about it. Like even the folks who are the most high on it are like, the inventory is bad and this is bad and this doesn't work, but this is great and this is great. So like I think it's going to be an experience that has peaks and valleys to it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a game that works really well for some people. And I think it's going to be a game that feels maybe like too nerdy for others. And it is like a little impenetrable because it, you know, is a little obtuse, you know, but that was what Red Dead Redemption 2 was like. I feel like it's going to be a little bit like that, where there are going
Yeah,
to be some people
everyone
who are
was
like,
raving
whoa.
about it, but I bounced off that. It was too much for me.
And like I finished it and loved it, right?
Yeah.
But it's like I also think I could see the things that people didn't like about it, but for me the good outweighed the bad. And I don't know.
Mhm.
I think it's gonna depend on what your taste is. But I
I
I
I've seen people saying that they're having fun though,
yeah,
and
me too.
and I also think part of it is that you can't post from your Xbox to Twitter anymore. Like, I do think there's
That's a
something
good
in that.
point. Yeah.
Like, you can post a video of a goofy clip that you've just had and post it straight to Twitter, and everyone's talking about it and retweeting it and like, haha, look how great this was, or look how bad this bug was. It's just not possible anymore without you sending it to your phone, downloading it on your phone, opening the app and doing it. And who wants to do that? It takes you out of the game. I
But
just
I
don't
mean,
think anyone's bothering.
I think you gotta imagine that this game is doing pretty good because it's 24-hour peak. Wakahula from the Discord, one of our Patreon producers, shared a screenshot where the 24-hour peak of the game was 245,000 plus concurrents.
And that's
Which
just on Steam. So that's like
and the
not even
game's
accounting for Game Pass or
yeah, and the game's
on
not even
PC.
technically out yet, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so you know I think the people who are there and talking about it are definitely the heavy enthusiast crowd, and people who are negative are always more likely to share their experience than people who are positive. I think it was like a joke exchange maybe, but I think it was actually pretty holds pretty true. I think it was Stevie Yaki who said this, where it was like, I think anybody who's enjoying the game is not posting about it because they're having too much fun playing the game,
Hmm.
right?
But I do think people will be posting it if they could do it from their Xbox and they could post a really cool screenshot that
And
they
I think
took
I
in
think they
photo
will.
mode.
I think they will.
Yeah.
You're right. But yeah, I think a lot of people are probably just deep in it, you know? But I don't know, it's interesting because like I think for me, the thing I'm most surprised by is like I wasn't expecting this game to get sevens. And I think when I have the context from like Gene Park and folks who are like, I think the game was not meant to be played in 2 weeks. You need more time with it. It needs to ruminate. It's, you know, And a lot of people are like, I don't advocate for waiting for games to get good, but this one is, it takes a little while for it to click, whatever, whatever. Like, that's all valid criticism. And I can see why someone would be like, well, who cares if the first 12 hours are slow? If I loved the next 100, I can imagine getting to the end of an experience and writing a review that way. I can also imagine someone being like, this is my job to really critique this critically and like to try and, you know, think about the consumer and the person that's going to buy this and play it for 30 hours and feel like it was shallow and disappointing. Like, that's totally valid too, and like, I guess that's what surprised me. There were three particularly low scores. And again, not crazy low, sevens, right? Seven, 7.5. But they stood out to me, right? You called out the IGN one from Dan Stapleton, who said Starfield has a lot of forces working against it, but eventually the allure of its expansive role playing quests and respectable combat make its gravitational pull difficult to resist. Christopher Livingston at PC Gamer gave it a 75, said Starfield shares plenty of DNA with Skyrim and Fallout 4, but ultimately falls short of both. And then at GameSpot, Michael Hyam said, Bethesda's spacefaring adventure has its moments with impressive scale, satisfying combat, and some worthwhile side quests, but its shallow RPG systems and uninspired vision of the cosmos makes for a journey that's a mile wide but an inch deep. And I think that's really interesting because I heard I was listening to a conversation Gene Park had on a like little mini podcast on Alana Pierce's YouTube channel, and he was saying that he wonders if Michael feels that way because he had to play the game, in 40 to 60 hours in 2 weeks and was doing the reviewer thing of like,
Got to
if
get a
you're
taste of everything. Got to try
exactly.
it all.
And everyone has said that that's not the way to play this game. And like, you can argue that that's a criticism, whatever. Like, I'm not here to say that Michael's wrong or whatever. That's not my point. My point is more that like,
I actually do think that is maybe a flaw with the game's design, that it should be kind of funneling you towards one of them in the same way that a class system would work, whereby oh, you really want to do space travel? Well, this is where you should be going. Or you really want to be into like
I
the
know
exploration and the
it's tough
gunplay? This
though.
is what
It's
you should be doing.
it's tough because it's like, how do you do that without it feeling like handholdy and like overly, it's like, it's the same kind of thing that we praise
Yeah,
Elden
but
Ring
like
for.
it seemed like we got 12 hours at the front with all of those tutorials and things.
Yeah.
Like that seemed to be what a lot of the comments were, is that there's so many systems it's teaching me for 12
But
hours. I'm not really getting anywhere.
I guess that's the thing though, is like, how do you teach all the systems that the game allows you to engage with in
It's
a
tough.
meaningful
Yeah, it is
way?
tough.
Because like, I've heard that there are side quests, right, where it'll be like you take this mundane side quest where someone asks you to run a chore or an errand or whatever, and then it spins off into a 15-hour side quest, and it'll be like stealth and this and that. And it's like, there are things that are only going to come up when they come up, and it's like hard to be like, do you want the first however many hours to just be us like literally showing you everything in the game, or do you want there to be surprises? It's like, I don't know. I'm interested to get my hands on it because I think whether or not you agree with all the choices or not, right? Which it sounds like most people don't. It seems like there's a lot of really cool systems and like opportunities for role playing in a deep, interesting way. And like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess
But
I'm
I don't know
excited.
that it's as interesting as the other RPGs in contention by the sounds of it. And
I don't know.
I
Yeah.
do want to reserve judgment until I've played it, but I struggle to see anything matching Baldur's Gate's level of depth in terms of roleplay. But I don't think that's what Starfield has promised, and I don't think that's
They're
really what
very
Starfield's
different
offering.
games from the sound of it. Yeah, which is interesting. But like, I think I'm inclined to agree just because like I think the thing that Baldur's Gate does so well is character, and like it sounds like maybe that's not always the strongest. Like I've heard multiple people say that the characters in Starfield feel a little bit like Westworld animatronics, where they feel like characters in a game rather than like
I mean, it's
people.
running on the creation engine, so yeah, they probably look
Yeah,
like Westworld animatronics.
sure, sure. But it's like it's interesting because the fact that it's sitting in at an 88, it's a point above Final Fantasy 16, which is a game that is definitely in contention for me. It's got to be pretty good, like that's not a bad place to be sitting. Um, and I don't know, it's nuts because like
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
even if you look at like some of the stuff like games from previous years, like Final Fantasy VII Remake was an 87. And I think people considered that one of the best RPGs in the year it came out.
sure. Yeah, or of the generation, right? So it's like
Yeah,
an 88's totally respectable. It's just, I guess, a matter of like, I don't know. It's like I guess it is having the Baldur's Gate of it all, right? Like Baldur's Gate is the elephant in the room. That coming out a few weeks before it coming out the same day on PlayStation, like it does feel like a bit of a, you know,
I gotta
an
say, I really
inopportune
hate
moment.
the early access stuff. I'm kind of sick of the early access stuff. It makes it so confusing as to when the game actually comes out. I saw so many people complaining this weekend about Baldur's Gate early access on PS5 and like the time not lining up and stuff, and like it never seems to work well. I kind of
It's kind of
don't
wild
get
that
it
they
at this
both did
point.
it too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really weird.
but I mean, I don't know. I guess
I
it's
guess
like,
it pays the bills, you know. It's like people are
yeah,
paying for it.
and
But I
it
don't like I do not like the $40 FOMO fee.
yeah.
I do not like them.
They must though, right? I mean, shoot,
Yeah,
200,000 people did it on Steam, so it's pretty good.
it's
They
a
got
lot
to
of
be pretty
FOMO.
pleased with that. Yeah, makes up for
I'm
the.
over here with the Jomo playing Baldur's Gate 3 instead, and it's great. And I had a good time.
I will say it's funny because it's like I guess it's also a good way to counteract the Game Pass of it all. It's like, oh, you can play it.
Well, they've always done that. They've always got me with the DLC,
Well,
and
yeah,
they will probably continue to
but
do
with
it.
this, it's like being like, oh, I mean, yeah, you could wait for Game Pass or you could play it. Yeah,
They
you
did
could all
this shit with Forza Horizon 5 as well.
smart.
Like, pay to get it early.
Get it early and you get the DLC. You were gonna get the DLC anyway, weren't you?
And you're still, and because you didn't actually buy the game, you own the DLC, but you don't own the game. So you're going to continually pay us forever and ever. Keep paying us those subscriptions.
So while we're like talking about the RPGs of the year here, there are a couple questions that Asobi wrote in with a couple weeks ago that I wanna pull back to. It was originally part of a patented Asobi 3-question formula, but I pulled out number 1. So it's
Come
just
on,
2.
there's a bonus. That is a
There's a
third.
bonus, but it's not really a question, you know? So anyway, number 1. Do you think that games like Final Fantasy 16 need a new genre name with how there's been discussion about how it not being as RPG as games in the past have been? I personally think Final Fantasy 16's genre would be best described by cinematic RPG. Um, I don't know. I feel like I I guess it depends on like what you mean, right? Because it's like the game is still, I'd say it's more action than RPG, but like,
Yeah, doesn't this have the like fight system from Devil May Cry? Isn't that like basically what they've
yeah,
pulled?
it's more of a like hack and slash type
So it's an
thing.
action RPG like Diablo. It depends how cinematic. I've not played the game, but I do know there are hours of cutscenes in that
Tons of
game.
cutscenes. Yeah, I don't
But
know. I
there's
guess it.
tons of cutscenes in Diablo, and there's tons of cutscenes in Baldur's Gate. I'm constantly watching some guy with horns or some squid face doing something, and I'm talking with them. Like, there's always something going on.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like I would say I would describe it as being more of an action RPG, than anything, right? Where it's like I think of like Kingdom Hearts in that way, right? Where it's like it's not turn based, but there is still like you're building a loadout and you're like leveling your character up and you're watching your
Mhm.
skills go up and the numbers go up and
Yeah,
you know
that does sound like Diablo,
it is
which
it
is an
is the
action RPG.
most, I think, diet RPG that Final Fantasy's ever been, but I think that feels more of like a comparison to other games in the franchise than it does to like RPGs as a whole, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
It's dicey. I think some people definitely get into it too, where it's like, well, if like the game is like about the story and like have like that is a big part of it, right? If it's like a big sprawling adventure, like that plays into the RPG angle of it. Is it's like RPGs are usually very story heavy and dialogue heavy.
Are you rolling your own character in it, or are you just
No, you
playing
play a character's adventure, but like that doesn't make it not an RPG, right? Like I think if you do roll a character, that makes it more of an RPG. But there are plenty of
How
like,
is it any different to something like Assassin's Creed then?
Because
which
Assassin's
people
Creed,
don't really
there's
consider
no character
RPGs.
stats.
There are. You have skill trees. I mean, I guess Origins and Odyssey kind of changed the game. They are really RPGs, but I don't think they've ever
That's
called them
more,
RPG.
yeah, that's more of an RPG, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing, is they added RPG elements to it. So it's like, that's the thing, is like, it gets dicey because there are tons of games that are not RPGs technically that have RPG elements, and it's like, where do you draw the line? I don't know. That's why I'd call it an action RPG, because it's more of an action game than it is an RPG, but there is still that I have a character, they're leveling up. When they level up, their hit points get higher. I can pick skills and gear and things that are like improve my health or improve my resistance to this or do that or do that. You're not doing that kind of stuff in a game like Assassin's Creed, generally. The classic ones.
Yeah, the new ones you are, yeah. But
Sure. But those are,
does that make Hitman an RPG?
no, that's an immersive sim.
Well, yeah, it is, yeah. But can you not have an immersive sim with RPG elements?
You can, but again, that's like, if you call anything that has RPG elements an RPG, then like Call of Duty is an
It's
RPG,
tough, yeah.
right? So it's like, what does
Yeah.
that mean? I think it's when the primary elements of the game are role-playing game elements that it becomes a role-playing game.
But what are the primary elements of a role play game? What do you consider that?
I think at its core, it is stuff like Baldur's Gate and Skyrim and like Starfield, where like you're
So it has
embodying
its
a
like roots
character.
in tabletop.
Yeah, right. That's what I would say. But again, like, JRPGs historically have not necessarily been that way, right? Like, you think of all the Final Fantasy games that are just straight up turn-based RPGs, they have a story and a main character whose journey you follow, and you know, in that way, the role you're playing is Cloud or Clive or Sora or whatever,
Mm.
right? Like, not.
Do you get to pick the dialogue choices in Final Fantasy 16?
Yes, but they don't have like a huge bearing on. It's more like coloring in. You know,
Okay.
it's more like, you know,
It's that you pick something and the next line of dialogue is gonna be the same no matter what.
or like it'll be a little different, where it'll be like, if you made a joke, they'll laugh and they'll be like, ha ha ha, you know, whatever, and then they'll just say the normal thing, you know, like, it's like that kind of thing.
Okay, fair enough.
Definitely not.
So more like a choose your own adventure, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's like, it feels more like a linear action adventure game with cutscenes, but it has like, the whole combat system is based on RPG elements. So I don't know. It's a tough one. That's why I said it's an action RPG, I would say.
Do
Number
these
two.
genres really matter at the end of the day? Do you think?
I think they matter in the same way that review scores matter, where like they're useful for classification, and for communicating to consumers or to, like, you know, potential fans, like, why it might or might not speak to them.
Yeah.
But that's it, right? It's like, I think it's, as soon as you get into it in any like kind of serious way of like, this isn't an RPG, it's like, whatever, right? Like, who cares? You know, like, it doesn't really matter. It's just
Yeah, I just think some of them aren't very descriptive, you know? Roguelike, for example, it's a game like Rogue. We never came up with a better term for it. We never came up with a better term than Metroidvania.
we have a
Although
tendency.
Nintendo's got one now. I can't remember what they call it these
Yeah, but
days.
it's bad. I think that's why,
Yeah.
right? It's like, I don't know, like, I think we have a tendency to name things like that after games that set a standard sometimes, because there's not a better word for it. Because like you
Just
said,
something
like,
like Destiny. It's a Destiny type game, you know?
but see
A
that
looter shooter.
yeah, but like, that's the thing. We have a
Yeah.
name for that, and that means something, and it's descriptive, right? So it's like, I don't know, like, I think some of them are really good. I think like a roguelike is actually not bad, because it's like, you know what it means, because it's a word. It's like, oh, I know what that is, right? Like, it isn't easy to describe and boil down into like platformer, right? Where it's like, you're jumping on platforms. Got it. It's a platformer. It's a shooter. You're shooting a gun. Got it. Right? Like, the more complex a genre becomes, where there are like a lot of different nuances, and that's why there's like roguelites and then there's roguelikes, right? And like, those are two different things, and it's like, the language has to get more complex the more niche you get. And with something like an
Yeah.
RPG, where like there is a huge breadth of what an RPG is. Baldur's Gate is an RPG. Fallout's an RPG. Disco Elysium's an RPG. Like Final Fantasy is an RPG. Like those are all totally, you know, they share some things in common, sure, but like they're also very varied. Pokemon's an RPG, right? Like, but like it's also totally different than Baldur's Gate. It's a broad genre, you know? It's like shooter, right? Like, well, what kind of shooter? A third person shooter is a lot different than a first person shooter, right? Which is a lot different than a top down shooter.
Yeah, I do love a good top-down shooter. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think it's strange though, and I think games can be in many different genres and categories at any given time.
And
And
I think that's the thing too, is that most things, the longer a form of art goes, the more likely it is that everything becomes multi-genre or fusion,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, like we mentioned Hitman. It's stealth, immersive sim. It's got RPG elements. There's a new roguelike mode in there. Like there's all sorts in that thing.
Yeah.
And the same with I guess Final Fantasy 16. Yeah, it's action, role play, narrative driven. It's also a JRPG, but
Mm-hmm.
is it really? It's made by a Japanese studio, but it doesn't have the turn-based elements of a JRPG. It does the turn-based elements of a JRPG define what a JRPG is or no?
No, right? Like I don't. I mean, I don't know. I would argue no, because like Xenoblade's a JRPG, I would think, and that's not turn based, but it is.
Xenoblade is an action RPG, isn't it?
I don't know. I guess I
It
wouldn't
is
necessarily call.
tough.
I wouldn't call it an
Yeah.
action game. It's more like real time. So it's like when I think
Mm.
action, I think I push a button and they swing a sword. Not
Yeah, but isn't that what they're doing anyway
no,
in Xenoblade?
no. It's like you press attack and then they go and they start auto attacking and then you issue commands. Like that's
Mm.
more like a strategy game. You know, that's more like Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate isn't an action game. It's more turn based.
The Xenoblade Chronicles 3 officially is an action roleplay game, according
Fair
to
enough, but
Monolith.
I mean, I wouldn't call it that, you know. So like, I think it speaks to what we're talking about. That like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
all kind of nebulous, and you know, it's not easily defined because games are complex at this point, and they, you know, it's like you brought up the movie thing earlier. It's like you think about um, like the superhero genre, right? Is like a genre of movie that is like a major genre,
Mhm.
but it's like well, what does that mean? Right? It's like that a superhero's in it because like the Marvel movies, for example, right, are like they're comedies, they're also action movies, they're all, you know, it's like it's a bunch of different things. And it's like that's how you make something that appeals to a mass market audience, right? Is like you try to have something in it that is for everybody. And if it's like, oh, maybe like hardcore RPGs are like scary, but I can do a skill tree. Like that's that, you know, and like that's palatable to me. Or like a hardcore shooter is maybe not my bag, but like I can point and shoot a gun to get to another cutscene. Like, you know, it's all about like what the goal of the game is, you know? Like is shooting the point of the game or is it a means to an end? Right? Like in Starfield, they're shooting, but it's not a shooting game.
Yeah, that's true. And like combat for me in Baldur's Gate 3 has been secondary.
Right, right? Like, and for me, it's the same way. Like, I try to talk my way out of situations. Like, I
Yeah.
play and there are combat, but combat is a means to an end. It's a way that certain encounters end, right? Like, not everything. The point of the game isn't combat in the way that, like, you know, you brought up like Devil May Cry, right? The whole point of that game is the combat,
Yeah, or
right?
Doom, for example,
Yeah,
We're
that's
talking
a
about
shooter.
shooters.
That's a
Yeah.
shooter. So I don't know. You know, it's like most things are multi-genre is the answer. Number two, do you think Final Fantasy 16 has a shot at Game of the Year? If not, what categories could Final Fantasy 16 win? No, I don't think it has a shot at Game of the Year. Um, up
I don't know the
until
Game Awards categories. Hold on, let me bring them up.
recently, I thought it had a pretty good shot of being in the top 5, but I'm
I don't
increasingly
think so.
less sure of that. Yeah, because I just think there's too much. Like with between,
Could
you
have best
know,
narrative, could be in there.
it could be. I could see best narrative. I could see best music. Um,
Audio design, was that particularly memorable? No, there's a car game coming out with so that's gonna win. Always always wins. Forza's
yeah.
gonna win the car audio.
I see it winning soundtrack more than audio, yeah, than like sound design. Because yeah, I think you're right. It'll probably be a car game or a Star Wars game are always always
Yeah, yeah. Well, the
uh,
performance is memorable, maybe it could be
yeah,
in
yeah.
there.
I could see Clive's voice actor winning for like best lead. You know,
Could be best action game, could be in there.
yeah,
Bayonetta 3 won that last year.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's that style of game. You know, it's the combat director is the Devil May Cry guy, and he said he thinks it's his magnum opus. So
Mhm.
feel like that's pretty legit. I could see that.
I really wanna know what most anticipated game's gonna be this year. That's the one I'm really curious about
All the
because
games that have won are
it's been
gone.
Tears of the Kingdom for the last century, and that's now out. So what are we anticipating
Yeah,
next? We just need Nintendo to announce next month that the sequel to Tears of the Kingdom is in development, and then we can all be
can
voting
win.
for that as the most anticipated game.
I don't know. I feel like there are not that many big anticipated games left right now. Some, but
Stalker 2. Like,
no.
what else is coming out next year? Like, what is due out in 2024?
It doesn't have to be due out next year to win that though, right? Like it could
Okay.
be fun.
Mine is probably the James Bond game from IO. I'm
I think
really excited for that one.
I think Mass Effect could be a good answer. That's both that and
Yeah.
Dragon Age are like games that are have been in active development, and now the games that are sooner than them are out of the way. So the idea that they are, you know, I could see that, but I don't know.
Maybe the Persona 3 remake. That's probably pretty
That'll be
highly
out by then,
anticipated.
won't it? I feel like that's
No, it's
out
due
in
out in
November.
like March, isn't it?
Is it? I thought it was out in November.
No, there's the re-release, but then they did the remake that's like the complete like remake. Like
Whatever.
Persona 3 Portable was like coming out, yeah.
Sure.
Weird.
Well, I think it's I don't know. I think it's interesting. Because I think there are so many games out this year that are gonna really have that horizon problem. Where if it was like any other year, you could be a contender, you could be a game of the year. Final Fantasy 16 any other year could have been game of the year. And I don't think it's yeah, I mean, no, right? I think the idea that Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate, and Starfield are not the 3 games in the conversation for game of the year, I think is hard for me to understand. I think it's gotta be one of those. And even
Yeah, it just
Starfield
has
is,
to
like,
be.
kind of on the bubble now, right? Like, because like, even if you are somebody who trends higher on it, right? Like, did you like it as much as you liked Baldur's Gate? Did you like it as much as you liked Tears of the Kingdom? Do you have the same amount of caveats for it that you do for those games that you do for Starfield? I don't know. Like, there are definitely big Bethesda fans out there that are gonna be voting, but, like, you know, 3 big outlets gave this a 7, and the other
And
games in this
and it's
conversation are
locked.
9s.
It's locked to Xbox, which I don't think is going to be in its favor for the fan vote. But I kind of feel like the Game of the Year vote is probably swayed more by the jury.
Yeah, I would think so. Even with the fan vote, though, I mean, it's on Steam, so, like,
Yeah, true.
mm,
I'm looking through the Game Awards stuff at the moment, and I love how every single year on Wikipedia there's just a new picture of Jeff Keighley. It's just a different one every year.
yeah, they gotta show off what Jeff's doing, Jeffy Jeff.
Yeah, yeah. I want to
Alright,
know. All right, last question on Game Awards. Everyone, figure out and write in what shoes is Jeff wearing this year. What
what's Jeff wearing?
sneakers is he gonna have on?
Some Nikes. Okay, so we're going to talk about some Baldur's Gate 3 here in just a minute, but before that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of September. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. Y'all the real to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to go and show your support just like they did, or if you want to go and check out one of those sister shows, or if you want to go and keep the conversation rolling between episodes right into the show, or do anything else to show your support or get involved in the community, guess what? You can head over to flipscreen.games games. That's our website where you will find links to all that and much, much more. However, you choose to get involved, we thank you for tuning into the latest episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. All right, Steve, let's talk about Baldur's Gate 3. I want to set down the guidelines here, right? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about chapter 1. We're going to talk about up until the Goblin Camp.
Which I have not finished yet, by the way. Still doing it.
Fine. Major beat in chapter 1. If you've been playing the game at all, you know.
I almost skipped it, by the way. I got to the bit and it was like, do you want to proceed over the mountains? And I'm like, probably not. No, I'll back out. It was like, this will end Act 1, and you're like, move on. You won't be able to come back. Tie up all the loose ends before you go. And then it had like, your party is vastly underpowered to progress to the next stage. And I was like, okay, no, then no.
Whoops, my bad. Yeah, make sure you play the content. So basically, if you're already playing the game, you'll know what we're talking about. If you're not, it is kind of like the first tutorial mission, kind of. And they're not, I mean, I said this before, I'll say it again. I don't think that this is a game that you can really spoil. I think there are like plot points that we will mention that if you had not listened to our conversation, you wouldn't have known that you go to a goblin camp, for example. But like, unless you are planning on playing the same class as us and making the same types of decisions and all the roles go exactly the same way, you're going to have a different experience just based on how you go about things. So,
yeah, I mean, all the roles can go the same way if you save scum, you know?
Yeah, but don't.
Save. No, I know, it's pointless.
Here's my thing. I think if you're the type of person who wants to go in wholly 100% fresh, then, I mean, you probably don't need to listen to us talk about it, right? The game is really good. We both like it. You should go get it. I think if you're down to just go a little bit, I think this is going to be a safe conversation. We're going to talk about the decisions we made and how some things played out. We are going to get into a little bit of light spoilers. But again, this is like the opening few hours of the game. I really don't think this is anything that's going to put you off or spoil like actual moment to moment for you from listening to this conversation. So there's your warning. You're going to jump now. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. We love you.
I'm going to use Illithid Persuasion on you, though, and you should stick around. I'm going to do a D20 roll, and it's going to be a success.
Do you have a D20 on you?
No, I don't have a D20 on me. I've got an advantage, +1 D4 as well. So you can have to do that.
All right. Here's what we're going to do.
Use guidance.
I have it. Okay. Let's see. We're going to roll.
And what is it, 10?
15?
15. Where's a 50? That's high. 15's high.
Okay. So you rolled a 6. So okay, that's
what is it? It calls it critical failure. It comes upon the screen.
No, that's only if you get a 1. You didn't crit.
I just want to cry when that happens. It's like, what?
So here's the thing. All right, here. I'll do my persuasion check. And here's the thing, Steve. I'm a bard. So I have a lot of modifiers. Okay.
Oh, see, I have a lot as well as a warlock. I get advantage for charm, so I get
high
to roll
charisma
twice.
Classes. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Ha! 16, baby. We don't even need to do the modifiers.
Yeah.
So stick around, everybody.
Man, I love the dice system. It's so smart. It's straight out of D&D. It's wonderful. And I like the fact that there are those just background rolls when you walk anywhere.
Love that.
And they can go either way. You know, I've got a priestess in my party. She failed on a religion roll while my wizard succeeded. And I'm like, really? You're useless. What are you doing?
I love how that stuff happens, and I do like how like your the non-player characters like will influence that stuff as well. So like if you fail something, they can pass it. Like I do really like that. It does actually give you the sense that you're like traveling with a party, you know? And it's nuts how seamlessly they've taken the Dungeons and Dragons 5 system and actually made it feel authentic, you know, or like there are so many minor interactions you can have in the overworld and you know, in combat, out of combat, whatever. Like, it's very, very cool. And that's kind of my first question I want to have for you, which it's interesting that you're a warlock and I'm a bard, since we're both playing high charisma classes. How are you dealing with problems? Like, do you have like a silver tongue? Are you trying to talk people into things? Are you using magic to like control their minds?
Yeah,
What are
I
you?
got a big old worm, and I am using it at times.
You're using the mind flayer
Yeah,
like mind
of course
control.
I am. Yeah, it's
Oh, I'm
only sometimes if they've also got that mark on them, then I'm going all in with it. I'm like, you know what? I'm one of the true true minds. I'm a true
yeah,
mind.
yeah.
So I'm gonna go for it. Why not? But for the most part, I'm using persuasion. Sometimes I'm using intimidation, but I am trying to talk my way out of things more than fight my way out of things, which some people on my party dislike. I can't remember her name, but she's like an orc, and you meet her on the ship at the
Oh yeah,
beginning.
I don't. I haven't been traveling with her. I've like been switching people in and out to do different side quests and stuff. But I've been traveling with her less because it's the same with the rogue too, where it's like they just don't like the way I do things. And they
Yeah,
like
I also
complain.
don't like the priest because she's so judgy. She hates everyone, and I'm like, for a woman of religion, like I'm meant to be casting judgment on people, but she
I'm
is
sorry.
so suspicious.
Are you not familiar with
Okay, yeah,
religion?
fair enough.
I feel like
But
that's
she's like so fucking suspicious of anyone that joins the party. She's like, you shouldn't trust him. You shouldn't trust her. What's she doing? Well, I told you she'd be trouble. She's an I told you so kind of person, and I don't
a
like
little
that.
bit. Yeah, I get along with her pretty well. I think it's mostly just because again I'm a charmer. So like I've like anytime she's said something like that, I've kind of been like little closed minded of you there, you know. And then like whenever she and like it's worked out because basically the way that I kind of played it is like anytime she said something like that and I called her out on it, she's like, well, blah 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 blah, whatever. And then when I started asking her about her and her religion and like people don't like it and everything, and I'm like, I'm cool, I'm not judging you, like I'm just genuinely interested, like I don't your faith is your own. It's fine. It's cool with me. And she's just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, and then she literally had a moment where she made a comment about how I'm like one of the few open-minded people and blah blah blah. And I feel like she's pushing back on me less now because I'm like, see, like,
Okay. See, I like that. That's
you gotta
good.
work with
I had a
people.
mo-
You gotta work with people.
I mean, I had a moment in the Goblin camp where I was stood against a wall and someone was throwing things at me, and she was all in on that. And she loved it. She loved every moment of it, except I failed because I succeeded on a dice roll. And you have to fail on 3 dice rolls, which was annoying.
So, um, so yeah, so you said you're mostly talking your way through things. That's kind of how I have been doing things as well. Um, I don't really use the like mind control powers much because like my character, the way I'm kind of playing him is like being, like a charmer and kind of like being like, like as a bard, right? One of the like inspiration things you can choose is being like an entertainer. And you can like basically get inspiration points from like helping the downtrodden and like inspiring people and like so it's like I'm playing like a more altruistic character, so I'm trying to like not um it feels like not my character's style to like control people's minds rather than like be like I don't need to control people's minds, I can just manipulate them by talking to them for long
It's
enough.
really good though. It's really good because you only need to roll like a 2 most of the time. So if
Yeah.
you can roll a 2, which is very, very likely,
Like,
you're
I
able to
almost
just
don't
do what you
want
want.
that too, though. Like, I don't want it to be that easy, you know? Like, I kind of want to like have a
No,
harder
yeah, but then
time
they
of it.
can find you in their brain sometimes, and they really dislike that. I've done it with the people in my party, and they're like, "Don't try that on me again." And I'm like, "No, I'm probably going to. Probably gonna dig around in there and see what makes you
That's what I'm
tick."
saying. This is why you can't get along with anybody, Steve. You're trying to probe in their brains and stuff. I'm out here just talking to them.
It worked really well for me in the Goblin camp. I managed to stop myself being found out because I took over the mind of the big horned dude, and I spoke to the mind flayer through him. So he didn't get to ask the questions he wanted to ask,
Oh, that's cool.
which is great. Yeah,
I
it's
like
really
that.
cool.
That's a cool way to get through that. I got through it in a way different way. So I got to the gate. and I talked my way in. You know, like I did an intimidation check, and I was basically like, they're like, "Who are you?" And it's like, "Who the fuck are you? Your boss called me. Get out of my fucking way." And he's like, "All right, whatever," and just like let me through. And I was like, "All right, great," you know.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I did the same thing, and it's like it was like I don't want to talk to you alone, like a lowly person like you. I'm coming through. It's like, and they're like, "Whoa, I can see you're a true mind. Yeah, carry on, go on in."
Yeah. Yeah, right. And it's like you can pull that. Yeah, but I basically just was like, I'm a mercenary, like fuck off, get out of my way. And it's like, all right, whatever, fine. You know, go see the boss. And like that's kind of just like how I've been doing things is just like anytime somebody like challenges like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, what are you doing here? And I just kind of, like trick them, and I'm like, yeah, shut up, get out of my way.
Yeah.
Like there's like a guy in the camp that is like being tortured and you can like free him. And like literally
Hmm.
I went over to his his, the guys who were torturing him and I was like, hey, why don't you let me take a turn, And they're like, yeah, all right, sure. Like, let's see. What do you got? And I'm like, oh no, you can't watch. And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, I don't. I'm not doing a free show for the likes of you. Get the fuck out of my sight. And they're like, all right, rude motherfucker. It's just like, all right, and I just let them go. It's like, see you later, buddy. Like, you know. And I had one of my favorite interactions I've had so far is So did you find the town that's near the Goblin camp that they've taken over?
With the guy singing on the stage.
No, 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 no. So that's the outside of their camp. There's another settlement
Okay.
that's like nearby that is just overrun with goblins as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I walked through there, and I just the guy was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was just like, "Oh, I'm no bother. Just let me through or whatever." And he's like, "Oh, fine, whatever. I don't care about you." And then there's a cellar downstairs, right? Is that what the one where you're on about? There's like
I
a
think
cellar you can go in and dig around in, and there's some stuff down there.
maybe I can't remember if that's what I'm thinking of because there's a cellar in the other place that we were talking about, and I'm wondering if that's what you're talking about. But in this other town settlement, there's a group of ogres there. Did you run into them?
No, so yeah, I'm probably thinking about the other place.
So yeah, I think it's probably a different area. But similar thing though, like they try to ambush you and like you can either, like talk your way in or whatever. I had a weird situation where like I killed a couple of the guards and was like, okay, like because I thought it was where I was trying to sneak in. And then I just like walked in and like talked and somebody was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I'm here for some reason. They're like, oh, all right, whatever. And I didn't realize that I had killed anybody outside. So I was just like, oh, cool. So they're just letting me stroll around. No problem. And there's this group of ogres that are like hanging out, and you basically you can go talk to them. And there's like a couple different ways it can play out, right? Like you can fight them, they can attack you, whatever. But I talked to them, and I was basically like, so what's going on? Like, why are you working for these goblins or whatever? And they're like, oh, because they pay us good money, and like we get to eat all the people that we kill, so it's pretty awesome. And I was like, okay, so, like, what if you worked for me instead? And like I told them that I was one of the, the chosen whatever the thing you just said. So they're like, okay, we
The
can't eat
true
you.
minds.
Yeah, the true mind. So they're like, oh, that's a shame. So we can't eat you. That's a bummer. And then I was like, yeah, why don't you come fight for me instead? And they're like, all right, like, and they give you an item and you can blow this horn, and anytime you blow it, they'll show up. And as long as you have the money to pay them, like they'll just show up and fight
Oh,
for
that's
you.
great. Yeah, I need to go find them then. I found these other two, and it was a cave, and we went into a cave. It was the first time I used the mind trick things. And we went into it was like this guy who'd been attacked. So I've got one of those worms in my inventory now. I just pulled it out of his brain
Oh
with
yeah, I have a
magic.
couple of them too. Yeah, in jars.
And then I went into the cave, and I'd spoken to this like animal thing. This owl had an owl face. It was like an owl bear, I think it was. It had an owl
Okay.
face, but it was a bear, a giant bear, and I had like a cub in there. And I killed. I went to like talk to the because I can talk to animals. I went to talk to the
Me too.
cub, and the mum went mental. So I ended up killing the mum. And then the cub's there, like really sad and crying, like what's happened to my mum, and you can hear it because they're talking. Um, and like you have two options. It's like put out of his misery or let it live without his mum. And like both of them were really horrible. And I'm like, this is awful. Why did I kill this thing? Like
Why
this
did
is
you do this to me?
truly horrible. Like, why did I do I just killed the thing. Killed it. And then
Wow,
I
dude,
looted
you're a
both of them.
monster. I can't believe there's not an option to like take it under your wing. That should be the other option.
No, it's like let it live without its mum because you've got to deal with the consequences that you just killed its mum, so it's probably not going to survive on its own. It tells you it's probably not going to survive on its own, and it's going to suffer, or you can put it out of its misery and kill it.
Mm.
How horrible is that? That's
Yeah,
awful.
you're a bad dude. I never even run into
But
these problems, Steve, because I don't kill people, and at least unless they deserve it.
I mean, it was an owl. It was an owl bear, wasn't a person. But yeah, those
Wow,
two are on
okay,
my
she can
side there.
talk,
Yeah, they can still talk. Did you talk to the cow in that town?
Yeah.
And he's just like, go away now, moo.
And he's
He
like,
just
definitely
says
a guy.
moo.
Yeah, you're like, "What are you
Yeah.
doing?" And he's like, "Back off, dude."
What's your like strategy there? Because I've not decided what I'm doing about the goblin camp yet. I can't decide who I like. I think the druids are assholes. That woman who was like torturing the child for doing something, I was like, "Oh, I can align with that. That's not on."
So, do you wanna know what I did?
Yeah, I kind of want to know what you did.
So, I snuck my way in, right? Like, I not snuck, I guess I talked my way in. And I went into, like, the interior of the camp, and there's, like, 3 leaders that they have there that you need to talk to, and there's, like, a bunch of
Mhm.
different ways you can play it, right? You can either you'll come in and they'll attack you, or you can try to side with them, and you can kinda go down this alternate route and, like, be a bad guy, whatever. But my character, right, like I said, I'm playing as kind of, like, like, kinda like a Robin Hood or like a Han Solo, like a roguish hero, right? So it's like he's not gonna work with goblins, right? Like I'm not signing up to fight with people that are, on the side of an evil god, right? Like it's like not happening. So I went in and I rescued the
Is that
bard.
so? What's that god called? Like the advantage or something? What do they call it?
Uh oh, it's like the something one or something. Like I
And I
forget what
keep
it is.
seeing it. I keep
It's
seeing
it's
it.
it's not this, but it's something like The Exalted. It's like you know what I mean? It's like something the blank, but I can't remember what it is. And I know that
I'm looking it
it's
up, but
I think they maybe also
the
call her
absolute.
the absolute, right. And I think they call her the lady sometime, something like that. Like I think I remember them calling, maybe they were just calling her like our lady or whatever. Um But so basically I went through, I scoped the whole place out, right? I talked to everybody I could talk to, and I freed, the NPCs that were captured there that were good guys and stuff. And you find the like leader of the druids is this guy named Halson. And he's the one who, like you said, there's like that mean woman who's like leading the druids while he's away. And the guy who's trying to talk her down and like, get her to leave the girl alone, he like implores you to go find Halson. When you go and talk to the healer, she mentions Halson. And like both of them are like,
Yeah.
oh, like he's not a bad dude. He's nice. Like he's even handed and everything. He's the one who let them in the first place. Like he's cool. So I was like, all right, word. Like I'll find him. We'll free him. We'll bring him back and I'll try to settle things. And hopefully I can settle things amicably and the refugees can stay. And if not, I've already established that there's you can lead them out of the place as well. So I'm like, I got options.
See, my option and the one I was thinking of taking is that you have to like. There's this object, right? This artifact that Shadowheart's got, and you don't want it to be found because of reasons. And there's this woman who like can detect that she's like got it or something, and she's like looking for this artifact. And like the only way I can get her to be thrown off the scent is to go on a hunt with her.
Oh, I
And
haven't
it's like,
encountered this yet.
and
Interesting.
I've got to like, I can tell her the location of the grove, in which case then she'll trust me, and I can then get her to do what I want because she'll go there, she'll find everyone in the grove, and she'll kill them all, and then she'll be best mates with me.
What?
Or I can give her a location of a fake place, and then try and like chase after and kill her before she finds out that it's fake
I
and
don't think
I
you
gave her
should
the wrong
work
place.
with this person, Steve. She sounds pretty evil.
Or I can give her the location of the grove, but tell the grove that she's on her way and warn them.
Mm,
Some
okay.
people will die, but not everyone. But she
I
obviously will then not be able to trust me and I can't work with her.
I
But she
just feel
does
like you
seem
should
pretty
not
powerful.
work with her. She seems bad.
Yeah. But how cool is that? I was like, oh god, what a quandary. I don't know what to do because
It's
she
cool that you
seems
can
really
side with
cool.
the goblins if you want. Like, you
Yeah.
can basically do whatever you want, like, you really have a lot of choice. So anyway, I let Halson out, and then, he can turn into a bear, and you can have him join you, and you can just fight your way out, and that's what I did. I was like, "Yeah,
That's cool.
let's just kill
I do
everybody,
like a
fuck it."
druid, yeah.
He
Okay,
was
that's fun. I don't think I wanna do that though. I kind of think I quite like the goblins.
You're a fucker, dude. You're so evil. You're always like, "How can I be the most evil, smarmy little
No,
fuck?"
it's not evil. They're just out for themselves, and I kind of
They
relate to that as
literally
like a nomad,
They're
you know?
literally trying to take over the whole world, and they're eating people. Like, dude, they're
I'm fine
bad.
with it, and I love my mind flare powers. They're really fucking
So you're a
cool.
bad guy. You're a bad dude.
Kinda, yeah. I think I probably am. Yeah,
You're a warlock, you evil
yeah.
motherfucker.
It's great. I love it. What do you think about the people in your party? I'm slightly in love with Gale,
Gale's the tiefling, right? I
wizard,
haven't.
who needs
Oh, the wizard who needs
to
the
eat
magic.
magic
Yeah,
artifacts.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
like him. I like him a lot. Yeah, he's my buddy.
He's
Right
so
now,
funny, but so annoying that I have to keep giving him magic shit that's really useful.
I just anytime I find something that's like a shitty artifact, like, I've just been saving those for him. Um, yeah, I like every character so far, like, even the ones who I don't get along with, like, I like them. So far I have the orc, I have the, vampire rogue, I have the cleric, and then, I have that, like, knight guy who's hanging out with the druids in the grove.
Oh,
Um,
he I've gotta sleep to talk to him and go back to, like, the do a
yeah,
long rest to do that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm in the middle of doing at the moment. Had a big old dream sequence and stuff and,
Yeah, yeah, I did that a couple sessions ago.
stopped the orc from killing me. She was gonna, like, slit my
Yeah,
throat.
yeah. So I guess I have 5 people, and I like them all, right? Like, I think right now, Shadowheart, who's the cleric, and, Gale, the wizard, are the 2 who've been in my party the whole time because I get along with them. Like, they react to my choices well, too.
Yeah, they do
Um
for me as well. I think they're pretty similar in vibe to someone who with, like, high charm.
Yeah, and, like, they generally like when you make altruistic decisions, right? When I agree to help somebody, when I agree to do something kind, like, they respond well to those things, and the rogue and the orc both don't, so I'm like, "Alright," like, I'm
No,
traveling
they're
with.
like, they're just like just absolute butchers. They just wanna go in and solve everything with a sword.
Yeah, and, like, they're just trying to survive, right? Like, they're out for themselves, and it's like, that's fine, so it's like, they probably work for your play style a little bit more. But also, like, I like traveling with those kind of characters and softening them too. Like, that's the thing I often like to do in those games is like
Okay.
traveling with the jerk and then they become less of a jerk. But I think
Or
I'll
do you think they're
probably.
still the same, but you've learned to uncover that they've actually got depth?
How do you mean?
So rather than you softening them and having that action on them, you realize that there's more behind the tough guy exterior,
Oh
and you
yeah,
learn who they
that's
are as a
usually the
character.
thing, right? Is like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's some reason they are the way they are or whatever. But that's the thing I always really liked about Dragon Age, right? Is that like I mean in Mass Effect as well, I guess, but there there are characters that are, like, rooted in an ideology that is very different from yours, and it's, like, just because I like being able to warm up to characters who I don't see eye to eye with. Like, I think that's always interesting when it's like, "Oh, okay, like, this character who, like, initially doesn't get along with me because they don't like that I'm soft or I'm this or I'm that or whatever," and then you kind of are like they come to respect you, so they come to then, like, be more open to your style of action, and things like that. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's always interesting, and it's especially fun when you have a character who it's like, "Oh, okay." I like that about the rogue, where it's like he and I like, he disapproves of a lot of the things I do, but it's like we still kind of get
Does the
along.
disapproval actually amount to anything?
Yeah.
Eventually, are they just like you piss them off so much they're not in your party?
I mean, I haven't gotten that far, but I would imagine that that's the case. I would imagine if you keep making choices that are antithetical to how they take action, then they'll probably turn on you or something.
Hmm.
Because that happens a lot in those kinds of games, right? Like there are characters in Dragon Age or Mass Effect or whatever where it's like, oh, they're a bad guy and you're always doing the goody goody thing. And eventually some criminals like, fuck them, come join me and we'll kill them and turn in the bounty. And they're like, yeah, whatever, fuck you, boss. And they turn on you, right? Or like the alternate where it's like they're a good guy and they're like, you're despicable. Like, I'm not gonna get behind you while you do this, and then you gotta kill him. Like I imagine
Oh
something
yeah, I'd be fine with that. You know what though? Sometimes you can just control their mind and they'll do it anyway, so it's okay,
that is
and
true.
I'm okay with that. That works for me. I I want to talk a bit about um performance and where we're
Oh,
playing.
boy,
I'm playing on.
real quick, before we move on from that, I do just want to say, in terms of like things that they impact, it definitely impacts things like how much the characters are willing to talk to you and like romance. Like I've already like
Oh yeah,
started
yeah.
romancing a character because we've had a good bond, or like with
Which
the
one?
magician. Or
Shadowheart?
yeah, yeah. So far, I don't know if she's gonna be my like long term romance, but like for right now, it's like I'm like, yeah, cool. I'll take the half elf goth girlfriend who worships the death god. That sounds cool.
Yeah, she's decent.
Yeah.
I want to talk a bit about performance. There's one setting that's really annoying me
So let's
because
say we're both playing on Steam Deck, right?
because it's not out on PS5 yet. We haven't paid for early access there. It's out today as of time of this release on Wednesday. So if you're interested, you should go pick it up. But I gotta say, it runs pretty well on Steam Deck. You were right when we spoke about on the Steam Deck podcast. Some of the overworld areas have a little bit of slowdown at
Yeah.
times, but for the most part, I'm getting 40 frames per second, and I'm kind of happy with that. It dips to 30, sometimes sub 30, and it's really where there's a lot of foliage. It
Yeah.
seems to
I haven't
struggle to
locked
render
it
the
for
foliage.
me, and I found that that's better. I at least for me, right? Because like I think it doesn't struggle to maintain a it doesn't struggle to maintain a consistent 30. And I would rather have it be consistent at 30 than being like, it's 40, it's 30, it's 40,
Yeah,
it's
that's the best way
28.
to
Like,
play, 100%. But there's one setting. It does not seem to keep saving my settings, and and it really annoys me. So there's this camera option. I don't know if you've even dug into it, where it follows your character, and you can just basically play with one stick. And I fucking hate it. And I turn it off every single time I boot the game, and it never remembers that I've turned it off.
I don't
And
understand. I saw you talking about this in the Discord, and I'm like, I've never encountered this. I have no idea what you're talking about.
so
And I
have a look
can't
at your
believe
settings. It's like
that
called like dynamic camera or something.
I just can't believe it's this much of a problem for you. And I'm like, it's a thing I'm not even aware of. It's funny.
Yeah, like I'm used to controlling games and having full control over the camera. It like snatches it from you if you leave this setting on, so I turn that off. And it caused me a couple of issues because I ended up stealing things I didn't want to, or touching someone's chest that I wasn't meant to. And it's like the narrator's like, "You feel eyes watching you. Someone doesn't
Yeah.
like that." And I'm like,
It's
"Oh,
just
for
like
fuck's sake!"
negative. Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
the other thing, right? If you do stuff like that, that definitely impacts you when it comes to like making decisions and stuff. Like I've definitely seen scenarios already where it's like, somebody gave me information because I was nice or because I acted in a way that they respected, right? Whereas like if they catch you stealing, they're not doing that shit, right? Like
oh yeah.
so
How did you deal with the kid that steals from you or tries to steal from you?
I caught him, you
Yeah, me
know?
too.
And I
But were you nice
basically
to them or were you nasty? Of course you were nice.
no, I was nice. Yeah. I
Yeah.
literally, I told him, I kind of was like, hey, like, you're not as good at this as you think you are. And like, you should watch it. Cause like, I'm nice, but like, you don't want to be on the wrong end of somebody who catches you and isn't nice, is basically how I handled that. I kind of told them, I was like, you should get better at this or you should find another grift.
Yeah, or
Like,
stop. Yeah. I did I think it was perception roll. I've figured out that the tears were real, and then I was nice, but I was gonna be horrible. if the perception roll was like these are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
crocodile tears, I was
Yeah.
gonna be nasty as fuck.
I did the same thing. Yeah, basically, where it was like when I saw that it was like genuine, fear, I was kind of like, all right, like, they're kids, they're hungry, like whatever. Not a
Yeah.
monster.
Well, I am apparently.
You are. You
I'm
probably let that lady
50-50.
you probably let that lady feed that little girl to the snake.
No, I did not, but I was not happy when she took her away and put her in the cell.
She put her in the cell?
Yeah,
Damn, you're bad at this.
yeah. She looked
I
wet, and
talked
I was like, I don't really care.
I talked her out of it very easily.
No, I didn't give a shit. I wanted to, keep her sweet, yeah.
See, yeah, no, I just shamed her, you know? I basically was just like, I was like, "Really? Like, you're gonna do this?" And I literally, like, quoted Druid scripture to her and was like, "Real
I didn't
classy."
have that option. I couldn't quote any scripture. I didn't know anything. No, that option
It's
wasn't
'cause I'm
there
a
for
bard.
me.
I'm well read.
That's fun. That's
And,
fun.
yeah, and then basically, when I went and talked to her, she was just like, "Oh, yeah, like, what, now you're gonna guilt me and call me a monster or whatever?" And I basically was like, "I understand. Like, you're trying to keep your people safe. I understand that sometimes, like, like, being tough is required to keep people safe." And it was very easy to and she's just like, "Oh, like" I think she said something along the lines of, like, first you advocate for mercy, and then like, say something, like, very, like, even-heeled or whatever. Just like, I wouldn't have like, she basically is, like, saying like she respects the fact that I called for, kindness, but didn't do so in a way that was like naive. And I was able to kind
Okay.
of just like be like, okay, so we respect each other now, right? What the fuck's going on? And like it's like, all right, bye. And it's like I was totally ready to stick a sword in her ribs if she was gonna hurt this kid, but like we can talk about things like adults, right? And like that's how I handle basically every conflict is like, look, can we have a reasonable conversation about this? No? Okay. Like what are you gonna do?
Thinking about it, I could have probably just spoken to the snake as well.
Maybe.
Man, bizarre. Absolute bizarre game, but really wonderful. I'm having such a good time with it. I'm really glad I picked it up.
The depth of it is just insane, dude. I love how much control you have over the minutia of this kind of stuff and like how like we're sitting here talking about this encounter and it's like, oh yeah, there's like we have like similar stat builds too, and there's still like a dozen different ways that can
Well, I have different things to you. Like I can use like arcane and stuff, whereas I guess you have different shit that's at your disposal.
Yeah, most of the bard's abilities are like um there's a lot of like minor like illusion magic or like charms and things like that, right? Like there's like for your allies you can do like things that like inspire them and like give them helpful roles and stuff. But when it comes to like interacting with other characters, I have really high charisma. So like I can like talk my way through a lot of stuff just naturally, but then I have like a charm ability where I can like make a person like me if the role is successful, or I can make them at least non-violent, non-hostile. I have like an ability that will like make people double over in laughter and like stuff like that. Like,
That was fun.
I can conjure illusions and like trick people and stuff like that. And then like when it comes to like some of the knowledge based roles, because like you're a bard, like you're a storyteller, so like you're really good at lying. I'm really good at like coming up with ruses or like
Yeah.
knowing obscure pieces of information. Like I have passed a lot of like history, religion, like those kinds of checks just because it's like you're a bard, so stuff, like the history of the land, about heroes, about like,
Can you read the text then? Like I get a lot of times I look at a plaque and it's like this is a text, you have no idea what it says. Like you
yeah,
can read
I
this.
I pass a lot of those roles because it's like, oh yeah, like
Sometimes I don't even get a chance to roll. It's just you can't read this.
yeah. And I have had that once or twice where it's just like, yeah, no, you don't know what's going on here. But I've had one or two where it's like religion roll or like this, and it's like, oh yeah, like you recognize this word, and then because of that, you
That's
can
cool.
make the rest of it out or whatever. Little things like that. It's like I feel like most of what I like about the bard is like you're basically a rogue, but like you have like minor charms and spells and stuff, and it's like it's very much like you know kind of doing like the Nathan Drake thing of like talking your way through shit until somebody like calls you out and you're like, okay, like let's find our way out. Like, it's like, how deep in this can I get before somebody realizes that I've just lied my way through? You know, like I've gotten to the throne room. You know, how long until somebody realizes I'm not supposed to be here?
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, I'm playing some guy with like one eye and a cowboy hat, and he's just like going around the place.
How'd
And
you lose your eye? Was it the bard?
no, so I picked one of the pre-made characters at the beginning. Like, there's a bunch
Oh,
of
you
ones with
did?
backstories, and you can like listen to their backstory. So I
You
can't
didn't roll
remember.
your own character?
No, no, I can never
Weird.
be bothered.
That's wild to me.
I don't care. I just wanted to play the game. I was like, I'm gonna play a
Those are
warlock.
those characters are almost all NPCs though, aren't they? So like, you do you have one less companion now because you're playing this character?
I don't know. I don't
Good
think so.
question. Because like you can play as the characters you get as companions.
Yeah, yeah, you can like switch between them at any time.
No. But I mean, like you can pick, like the
Oh, you can
character.
pick them at the beginning. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe. I don't know. I just have no idea.
I'm trying to look.
I'm having a good time with him though. He's great.
What's your guy's name? Do you know?
He's called Steve, so I don't know.
Okay, never mind. Maybe next time. Well, anyway, yeah, I love this game, dude. I think it is very, very. It's making a very convincing argument for itself for my game of the year.
Me too. I think I like this more than Tears of the Kingdom, and definitely more than Diablo. The
Which is
only thing
wild,
that's
because that's
yeah,
not to say that it's made me like Tears of the Kingdom any less. It's just this might be
it's just
as
a
good, if
better. I
not
think it's
better.
a better game for me. I genuinely think this is a better game. It's a game we haven't had. I can't remember a game like this for a very long time. And
Yeah,
Tears of the
something else.
Kingdom was special and adds so much to the Breath of the Wild formula, but it's not unique in the same way that this is. Like, playing this is just so different.
Yeah.
It feels so different. It feels fresh, and I love every second of it.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I'm excited to dive more into it in the next couple of weeks, and I'm really excited to get it on PlayStation. I am enjoying it on Steam Deck, but I think I will have a better time with it on the big screen. It feels like
I've been playing it on the TV quite a bit, and 900p runs fine. I think it would obviously look better on PlayStation, but it's viable. It's a viable option if you've only got access to a Steam Deck and you want to play this, or you've only got access to like a laptop or something,
yeah.
and you can only play it on that. Still play it. It's still really good. Controller absolutely fine. I've never had to reach for the keyboard or mouse or anything
No,
like
no, no,
that.
no. Yeah, like it runs really good on Steam Deck. It's just I'm enjoying it so much that I think I want to have that opportunity to like do the bigger stuff on the big screen and have it, running in that
Yeah,
full fidelity mode and everything. And I got those GameStop gift cards burning a hole in my pocket, so I'm gonna go pick up a copy.
yeah. Thanks, Capital One.
What's in your wallet? This is not an ad. That is a bit, just to be clear. But
Yeah, go listen to the Steam Deck podcast.
get in touch, Samuel L. I'm down.
Hey, if we
Anyway,
can get him on the show, I'll be very happy. It'd be great.
you kidding me? That'd be great.
Come on.
Anyway, we're gonna wrap it there for today. Thank you guys for joining us here in another episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. Remember, if you want to go and become a Patreon supporter and get the show earlier, get a bunch of other perks and goodies. If you want to keep the conversation on Discord or via email between episodes, if you want to go check out some of our sister shows, you can find all that and much, much more over on patreon.com. No, sorry, on flipscreen.games. Excuse me. That's our website where you will find all the places we are all over the web, all the ways that you can get involved and show your support. However you choose to do so, we thank you for tuning in to another episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.